Hi guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode. Today we're going to talk about the last episode of the coordination course, which it's going to be talking about different types of blast beats, how to learn to coordinate all these different types of blast beats. First of all, we know that we use blast beats generally to play something very fast, very furious, something that gives that sense of speed during the songs. So we always want to keep that feeling while we're playing the blast beats, but we also want to give dynamics and have different options to use the blast beats and be creative with it. So today I want to talk about some different ideas that you can come up with so that you can use them, and then from this come out with your own blast beats and your ideas. So let's get into it and see exactly what we can do with this. So let's talk about the sound of the blast beat. What makes the blast beat sound so fast and powerful? It's the contrast between the low frequencies of the bass drum against the high frequencies of the snare drum and of the cymbals that we're using. That's what makes the sound of the blast beat so powerful and so fast. It's because these frequencies keep cutting through to each other, between each other, and that creates that sense of like an helicopter flying, and so it's like very fast, very furious, very powerful. So we want to keep that always in mind while we're producing our blast beats. And let's start to talk about the 1 foot blast beat, which is the one that I usually use. And the reason why I like to use the 1 foot blast beat instead of economy blast beats or other type of blast beats is because the amount of power that I give with my right foot is the same. So with the 1 foot that I played 30 seconds, 16 notes, it's the same amount of power that I have on my hands while I'm playing the blast beats on the snare or on any surface on the upper part. So let's hear out this sound, and let's go into the technique and into how to develop the 1 foot blast beats. Okay, so as we can see, the amount of strokes that I play with my right foot is exactly the same amount of strokes that I play with my left hand or right hand on the snare and on the cymbals. So this creates an even sound and even energy, even motions, and like even playing for me. And this is very important because it just gives me the sense that everything is balanced, and so I don't hit harder. I don't have like a dynamic or a way of playing that has a lot of power on the kicks because I'm playing 8 notes with my alternated feet, and less power on the snare because I play 16 notes, so double the notes that I play with my feet. In my opinion, the 1 foot blast is either both the original, because that's how it started off, like, so that was the first way of playing the blast beat, and so it has a tradition behind that. But of course that means nothing, musically talking, so it's not necessary to play the 1 foot blast. It's just a choice that you can have. But how can we develop the 1 foot blast? What's the best way of being able to play this? So first of all, we have to figure out a technique for our feet to be able to play the same amount of notes that your hands can do without losing too much power. And that has to do with the pedal settings and a lot of stuff that you can check on other lessons that I did. I use the swivel personally because it's the technique that allows me to have more power and to play very fast. And the way I do it, it doesn't hurt my knees because I make all the work on the ankle and on the knees, so I don't feel any pain or any problem with that. So that's the foot technique that I use. Instead on my hands, I like to play wrists instead of fingers, because based on the type of sound that I want, I always want to have a very loud snare drum. And so I always want to have a lot of power, and the fingers don't really give me that kind of power unless I don't tight the head a lot. And sometimes that's not possible based on the situations that I'm in. So I just got used to using the wrists. So using German grip with my hands and swivel technique with my feet. And then the way we want to coordinate this is the way I start to play the blast beats. It's always finding a phlegm between my right foot and my left hand. So having this feeling when I start, and then I just control this and go on playing with it. So something like this. Okay, so I always hear the first phlegm happening, and then I just follow with all the other strokes that first motion. So I never have problems of starting and of coordinating the blast. And then my right hand, I either think it unison to my right foot, so starting it unison with the foot, or I think of a phlegm between the two hands. So but in that case, I still will have to think of the foot with my right hand, but that depends on also on the surface. Sometimes I have to accent on the cymbal and then start the blast beat, like the strokes on the cymbal, the ride or the hi-hat later. So I have to think of that phlegm and then restart. So something like this. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, there's one phlegm when I accent on the cymbal, and then another phlegm when I accent on the right, when I start playing on the right with my right hand. So I think of a phlegm when I start the 1 foot blast, and then when I move my hand to the right, I think of another phlegm. But the first time I think of the right foot unison to the hand, the second time I think of the phlegm between the hands. So that I always played the right notes in the right part, in the right spot. A good exercise to work on the 1 foot blast beat is to start working on controlling the pedal with our foot and our ankle only, so no leg motion, and alternate the left hand and then the right hand, and then do the same thing with our left hand, our left foot, so in this way. And then we'll speed this up, increasing BPMs regularly. So you can either speed it up 5 BPM at a time or 10 BPMs at a time, and just switch the techniques to what's comfortable while speeding it up. So you get to a point where maybe the heel up doesn't work anymore, and you have to switch to another technique, which can be heel toe, swivel, whatever you guys are comfortable with. So something like this. And then you do the same thing, starting with your left foot. Okay, so start from a comfortable speed and then slowly speed this up, switching hands. In this way, you'll get used to play the 1 foot blast beat, and then you'll just have to put the two hands together and start playing alternated hands, one on the snare and then the other hand on the cymbal, alternated. You can see this type of exercises in the Stone Killer sections, where I explain all these type of exercises more in depth. And then all the other type of blast beats are going to conceptually based on the same way of thinking and working on them. So thinking always looking for the flam, but we're going to use different limbs depending on the blast beat that we're playing. So let's see how creative we can get with the blast beats. We can then simplify our bass drum workout playing the economy blast beat, the so-called economy blast beat, which means that we'll play 8 notes alternated feet with our bass drum, and we'll play 16 notes with our hands on top of it. So something like this. The good thing of the economy blast is that you basically have way less stress in one part of the body, which is very relaxed, which is going to be the legs and the feet, and you can concentrate all the effort on the hands, so you can really use this to when you have to play very fast, like for example when you have to play at 300 BPM or 280 BPMs, because you can really only work on the hands and put all the stress in that part, and it gets very easier, in my opinion at least. When I play the 1 foot blast beat at 280 BPMs, I have to concentrate much more on every single motion because I'm playing more strokes with my feet, and when instead I play with the alternated feet, it's simple because I just have to think of the hand workout. So for example, something like this. Okay, so where I can really focus only on the hand work, and in this case only on the snare drum hand, because the right hand was also accenting around, so it's not as intense as the left hand, and the left hand is really the only hand that it's doing a lot of work, or more work than any other limb in this type of blast beat. So this is very good for very high speeds where you don't want to lose the accuracy and the power. So I suggest to use this in those situations. Then we have the bomb blast, which we already talk about this in another lesson. But the bomb blast is basically playing 30-second notes with our feet and keeping 16 notes with our hands. So in this way. Okay, so in this case, we play 30-second notes, so a continuous 30-second notes bass drum pattern, and I always think of my either left or right hand unison to the right foot, and then move the other hand around and alternate it to the hand that I'm playing on the snare drum with. So if I have to break it down, it would be something like this. So that I have my bass drum as a reference, and then I play everything else on top of that. And that's because I play many more notes with my bass drum, and it's easier to keep that as a reference and play anything else on top of it. Then, if we want to start giving dynamics to our blast beat, we can start adding accents on the snare drum and starting being more musical, maybe on top of what we're playing with the musicians or our band, or in the music context that we're playing in. Okay, so the way I play the accent here, it's basically exactly how I will play accents on a snare roll. So using the upstroke and downstroke motion while I'm doing this. And I can also do this on the blast beat using the right hand and playing the left hand on the hi-hat, so something like this. So in this way you give a lot of dynamics to the snare drum, and it makes everything more musical, and you don't have to only use the cymbals to accent, but you can also accent the snare drum. I think it's very cool, and you can become very creative with this. Then we can also use rudiments, like the Swiss Army triplet rudiment, and switch one of the hands on the cymbals. And I like to use this. You can either use this with both one foot or bomb blast or alternated economy blast. I'll try to give a demonstration of all three real quick. And basically the Swiss Army triplet, so this type of rudiment, we can switch it on the hands on the cymbals, playing something like this. Adding the bass drum in between, it'll come out something like this. Okay, so this is another variation that you can use. The way I always think of coordinating this, it's always, whenever I change the hands, I always look for that phlegm between the feet. So I always think of okay, and the more I speed this up, the more challenging it becomes, but it's very fun to use and to do. Another cool thing is to also switch the snare hand on the toms and create patterns between the snare and the tom, or the floor tom, so something like this. And this is another good way of creating patterns and creating motion between the hands and the one foot or the feet, depending on what you're using. The last blast beat that I want to share with you, and that I really like, and it's different from any other type of blast beats that I've played so far, is playing blast beats only with my feet, which will require you to mount a snare drum either on the left or right side of your drum kit. As you can see in my setup, so I have my left bass drum pedal, snare drum pedal, and then my hi-hat over here, so that I can play the the double pedal with my left foot, and it reaches all the way there to my snare drum. And this is very cool because I can play a blast beat only with my feet and having my hands completely free. And I can, for example, so when you play a blast beat, something that it might happen is that it flattens out the rhythmic section, because there are so many notes that are played that the rhythmic section becomes a little bit flat. Instead, if you have your hands free, you can maintain the rhythmic section with your hands, for example, playing on the floor tom in this way. this way you will still keep the speed, but you can add an epic feeling on top of this. Or you can just, for example, slow it down, adding a backbeat on the snare that you play with your hands, and have something like this. Another thing that I like to do with this is create a gravity blast beat. So I will play the feet blast beat with my feet, of course, and then I will play with my right hand on the snare, unison to the foot, and that creates an alternation with my left foot on the other snare. So I will have a snare drum on the first 30-second notes and a snare on the second 30-second notes, and so on. And so it'll create a gravity blast beat, so in this way. Or you can do the same thing with your left hand on the snare drum, playing unison hands, keeping the other hand on the right, so in this way. Okay, so as you can see, there are many ways that you can use the blast beat and you can develop and create. Remember to figure out the technique, as we always say, so that we know how to speed this up and not get tired. Always look for that flam between your hands and your feet while you're playing this. That's the secret to coordinate the blast beat, not having problems to start it. And doing the exercises of maintaining it, so more on the Stone Killer section. And then come up with, moving your hands and creating. Always remember low frequencies against high frequencies. That's what makes the blast beat sound so fast and powerful. And enjoy, have a good workout, and I'll see you next time.